Hello and welcome to episode 187 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. I'll be flying solo on the show today. The last two episodes featured my co-host Maz and I covering the D23 announcements related to Walt Disney World. Those episodes did very well, so I'm going to cover the rest of the theme park announcements from D23. Anaheim, Paris, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and Shanghai all have reasons to be excited about what's happening in the next few years in the Disney parks. Before we talk D23, I wanted to cover a few smaller topics. This episode is going live on August 29th. This past Saturday was my 11th wedding anniversary. My wife Courtney and I are actually planning on celebrating this weekend because it works better for our schedules, but I felt it was important to make a note. Even though she's only on the podcast sporadically, this show would not be possible without all of her help. As I have mentioned many times, Courtney lives with chronic illness, which is one of the main reasons that we have focused so much on accessibility of the theme parks. Today is also my mother's birthday. She also deserves a shout out for helping with the podcast behind the scenes at times. And it's always good karma to have people wish your mother a happy birthday. This past weekend, I was incredibly honored to be granted a press credential to cover the Tampa Bay Comic Convention. With the 35th anniversary of Disney's original animated version of The Little Mermaid coming in November, the highlight for me was certainly the Jodie Benson panel on Saturday. There's a video on the YouTube channel where I give my initial thoughts on the panel. Benson told amazing stories about her audition process that eventually resulted in her getting the gig. She shared her favorite moments with Howard Ashman and Pat Carroll while recording the songs and voice parts for the movie. The Disney legend was extremely gracious when talking about Halle Bailey taking the role of Ariel in the live-action version of The Little Mermaid. In fact, when mentioning her cameo in the live action, Benson talked about her character gave the dingle hopper to Ariel. But if you weren't paying close attention, you may have missed Bailey's Ariel pushing it back towards Benson. This action meant a lot to Benson, who felt it was Disney's way of saying that she is still very much Princess Ariel. Most importantly for me, she addressed the online conversation that in the original animated version, Ariel, quote, gave up her legs for a man. After stating that in her favorite song from the movie, Part of Your World, Ariel clearly wants to be a part of the human world before ever seeing Eric, Benson added that the movie, to her, is not about Ariel giving up her legs at all. To her, it's about Ariel trying to find common ground between these two worlds that she loves, but the occupants on both sides of the divide can't seem to communicate properly. Jodie Benson feels the 1989 animated version of The Little Mermaid is all about inclusion. When she said that, I got a big smile on my face. That has always been a major priority of this podcast. We've always set out to make as many different types of people as possible feel welcome. Finally, Benson wowed the conference room full of people by singing a version of Part of Your World live with a backing track. In such an incredibly intimate situation, it was actually emotional to see that performance. Once again, I want to thank the Tampa Bay Comic Convention for allowing me access to cover the event. We're going to continue to try to reach out to different types of experiences like this one for the podcast and the YouTube channel. The best way to help us continue to get access is to make sure you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. It just takes 30 seconds and it makes a big difference. Moving on to the parks, today is also a big anniversary. 5 years ago today, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge opened at Disney's Hollywood Studios. Earlier this week, I posted a video that was over an hour long talking about the land. That being said, in the coming months, I think it might be time for some hard conversations about Batuu. The major e-ticket attraction in the land, Star Wars Rise of the Resistance, is constantly dealing with operating issues, with the D23 announcements pledging billions of dollars all over the world in theme park improvements. Arguably, Walt Disney World's best ride is hardly ever at its best. Finally, a new mission will be added to Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run that will feature the Mandalorian and Grogu. This attraction definitely suffered in rewritability because the storyline had gotten very stale. Adding a new story will help, but also signifies that Disney may be willing to adjust the timeline in the land. If Disney eventually gives up on any timeline for Galaxy's Edge, that could mean Darth Vader, Darth Maul, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Princess Leia, and many other beloved characters making appearances in the land. It may even come time for the company to seriously consider the original plans for a table service restaurant and a third attraction. Over at Disneyland, there are times when Batuu is the empty part of the park, and at Disney's Hollywood Studios, the rides are still pretty popular with guests, but the rest of the land isn't as lively as it was for the first 2 or 3 years. Finally, today is the first day of Epcot's International Food and Wine Festival. The last time Food and Wine started this late in the year, it was 5 years ago to coincide with the opening of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Of course, I will be there to start the process of covering the festival for you. Make sure you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. I'll be hitting the festival hard for the first few weeks. To be prepared, I haven't stepped foot in Epcot since June 22nd. That is a long time for me. Get ready to hear about and see all the amazing food items. By my count, there are 32 new food offerings for the festival. Just a few of those new items that look particularly interesting are the autumn chili with bison, lamb, and pork belly, root vegetables, jalapeno cornbread, smoked cheddar, and creme fraiche. Back when I ate meat, bison was my absolute favorite. It is so lean that I imagine going along with the lamb and pork belly will be a great contrast. That will be at the Forest and Field booth between World Showcase and the Imagination Pavilion. The Milled and Mulled booth is also between World Showcase and the Imagination Pavilion and will feature 2 new dessert items. The Boursin fig and balsamic cheesecake with fig jam and pomegranate could be very popular. I think people will really be excited for the Wagyu Tamaki sushi at the Japan booth, which will be handheld sushi with sweet and savory American Wagyu beef topped with Takana Japanese pickles and spicy mayo sauce. Disney is trying something different with the American booth, and I am absolutely stoked for this, even though I can't have anything from it. There will be 4 different styles of hot dogs from across the U.S. New York, Chicago, Carolina, and Southwest style hot dogs are all on the menu. In my humble opinion, this is the kind of stuff they should be doing with the U.S. Pavilion all the time. All 4 dogs focus on different styles that exist throughout the country, mostly because of the immigrants bringing their traditions to America. There are 3 new items at the Italy booth, including the Italian-style nachos, a beef meatballs dish, and vanilla cheesecake. It's my personal recommendation during most festivals to avoid the Italy booth. There's always a long line. The food is too expensive for the portion size. Yes, even by Disney standards. And there are just better options elsewhere. The Refreshment Outpost has something that really interests me. Impossible spicy sausage with piri-piri peppers and onions and piri-piri aioli, which is, of course, plant-based. China is introducing crispy duck baobon with hoisin sauce and Shanghai scallion noodles with shrimp. The Brewing Lab in the Odyssey building is continuing to up its game with hot food. The unnecessarily spicy yet extremely tasty Carolina Reaper pepper curry wings with creamy cucumber rayata will be interesting. I would like to see how far Disney is willing to go with spice. Finally, another plant-based option has caught my eye. The Impossible Montreal-style burger slider with cheddar and tomato jam on a sesame seed bun. Some of my favorite returning items are the mac and cheese options at Macatizers, which will be in the new Communicore Hall. There's a traditional mac and cheese with herbed panko, the truffled mac and cheese, and the plant-based Impossible chili cheese mac and cheese with sour cream and cheddar. While I'm excited for all three of these vegetarian items, my co-host Maz made a good point on Twitter. If Disney is going to continue having vegan mac and cheese items with vegan cheese, they should make sure that not all of them have spicy meat replacements. It would be nice to just have a regular vegan mac and cheese for those who maybe are lactose intolerant. It doesn't even have to do with being vegan. Getting back to the brewing lab, my favorite item from last year is coming back in 2024 in the form of the Impossible buffalo chicken tenders with blue cheese, celery, and ranch. Of course, it's yet another example of Disney relying on heat to make their vegan options more appealing, but it just works in this case. Now, let's get back to talking about the theme park announcements from the D23 Expo earlier this month. We'll start where it all started for Walt himself. Disneyland Resort is getting ready to celebrate its 70th birthday. There was an announcement for the logo of the celebration, but there was only one major addition coming to Disneyland Park. For the first time, we're going to get the chance to see a Walt Disney animatronic. Walt Disney: A Magical Life will be coming to the Main Street Opera House. The show will feature the animatronic version of Walt in a replica of his office. The Disney family has agreed to this, so hopefully it is respectful to his legacy. I am not one of those Disney adults who deifies Walt Disney, but I am certainly excited for this show. There is a vibe in Disneyland that is hard to describe if you've never been there. You can tell that it is something special. Just being on Main Street does make you think of those early days of the park. If they were ever going to try to make it feel like you were in Walt Disney's presence, this is certainly the right location. As many people know, the first human animatronic was the Abraham Lincoln figure from Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln at the 1964 World's Fair, and then in the Main Street Opera House. When I first heard about the Walt show, I was extremely worried that we were going to be losing Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. Luckily, that will not be the case. Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln and Walt Disney: A Magical Life will rotate throughout the day. The exact wording from Disney is that they will rotate, quote, after its initial debut. That probably means there will be a short time that is just showing A Magical Life. I'm a history nerd, and I do love the history of the parks. I would hate to lose Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and I think the rotation will give guests reasons to stay and watch both shows. If it's successful, that will play a big part in spreading out crowds using one theater that is rarely even half full most of the time. Disneyland also got an opening date for their version of Tiana's Bayou Adventure. We are just a little over 2 months away from the November 15th opening date. The Walt Disney World version of this attraction has been amazing, even if some of the operations haven't been consistent for the first few months. Still, if the initial kinks are worked out, Tiana's is one of the best rides on WDW property, and I am certain it will be one of the best rides at Disneyland. Across the Esplanade, that is where we are really going to get some exciting changes. Disney's California Adventure opened on February 8th of 2001, and you will not have to look far on Twitter to find theme park fans who are furious that every change at DCA seems to chip away at the original theming. My first visit to DCA wasn't until more than 20 years after its opening, so I don't have a lot of thoughts on the original theme. I love the state of California. I played high school basketball in California, and when I lived in Arizona, I rarely missed an opportunity to visit the Golden State. If you were going to base a theme park on any state, with the possible exception of Texas, California offers the most varied locations to turn into attractions. While I would love a park based solely on California, I'm not as attached to any of those original themes. After the success of Pandora, the World of Avatar on the East Coast at Disney's Animal Kingdom, DCA will be getting what Disney calls a corner of Pandora. It's hard to say if this is going to be an entire land like its WDW counterpart, or if it will be more like one attraction tucked into a small chunk of the park. My honest guess is that Disney doesn't have that answered yet either. What we do know from the expo is that the additions will be based on Avatar: The Way of Water, and it looks like the main ride apparatus will be based on the same water ride system as the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Shanghai Disneyland. I saw the first Avatar movie and I absolutely hated it. I have never seen the sequel. Despite all of that, I'm filled with anticipation for a ride using the same tech as Shanghai Pirates. Ever since I first saw a video from that ride, I have wanted to experience anything like it. My feelings on the original Avatar movie haven't impacted my enjoyment of the land in Disney's Animal Kingdom. I think Na'vi River Journey is a beautiful attraction with a great animatronic, and Avatar Flight of Passage uses a bunch of technology to really make guests feel immersed in that world. Heck, I even love Satuli Canteen, the quick service dining location. So Disney has shown that they can knock it out of the park with Avatar, and they've shown they can knock it out of the park with that ride system. So I'm going to trust them on this change. Avatar isn't the only IP getting a water ride at California Adventure. Coco is also going to be coming to DCA. Judging by the concept art, this attraction is going to be more in line with the US versions of Pirates of the Caribbean or It's a Small World. Josh D'Amaro, chairman of Disney Experiences, promises that the characters in this ride will not be on a screen, but that the rooms will be filled with audio animatronics. This would be huge. There are a lot of Disney fans who are upset with so much new development revolving around intellectual property. However, even with the IP, going back to a slow-moving, storytelling boat ride with a ton of animatronics is certainly a step in the right direction. These type of attractions are great at eating people. The capacity of a popular boat ride will make the entire park more manageable. The biggest changes at Disney's California Adventure will be coming to Avengers Campus, opening in June of 2021 with just one new ride, Spider-Man Web Slingers, and the existing ride, Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. This land dedicated to Marvel was desperately in need of an e-ticket attraction. Josh D'Amaro surprised everyone in attendance at D23 by announcing 2 new rides to be added. Avengers Infinity Defense will be the major ride for the land, but Disney will also be adding Stark Flight Lab, which will allow guests to fly like some of their favorite Marvel heroes. This is absolutely needed because Avengers Campus was not a full land when it opened to the public. All of a sudden, 4 rides, roaming characters, shows, and a pretty decent quick service location. And this is now starting to feel like a land worthy of a gigantic franchise like Marvel. For those of you who love Disney Cruise Line, it looks like the company is all in when it comes to expanding this portion of the business. There will be 4 new ships added over the next few years, bringing the total fleet up to 13 ships. Where I was most excited was the announcement of a Hercules show coming to the Disney Destiny. Honestly, Hercules is an IP that I think is grossly underrepresented in tangible ways. Sure, Go the Distance can be heard in snippets during Disney shows when they need to put in a little motivation, but a successful show on a DCL ship could lead to more inclusion. Megara is one of the strongest and coolest female characters in any Disney content. Hades is a wicked villain. Everybody loves Danny DeVito, and Hercules is a relatable lead. The movie is certainly flawed, but the parts may be greater than the sum in this particular instance. When you combine those announcements with Josh D'Amaro promising the largest onstage puppet in Disney Cruise Line history for a Moana show that will debut on the Disney Treasure later this year, All of these announcements signify a commitment to DCL. Disney cruises are far more expensive than the competition in that market, but guest satisfaction keeps these ships booked solid to the point that continuing to add more capacity makes sense. This is a solid indication that Disney sees DCL as a huge part of future financial success, and let's be honest, that may even mean taking resources away from the theme parks eventually. Turning our attention to the international Disney parks, there's a new nighttime spectacular coming to Tokyo Disneyland. We are just a few weeks away from the debut of Reach for the Stars, which will be shown for the first time on September 20th. Disney is hinting that this show will bring the MCU into Tokyo Disneyland Park for the very first time. Disneyland Paris is also getting a new nighttime show, and it will take advantage of the projection technology that is used for shows like Happily Ever After in Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. The other Disney park in France, once known as Disney Studios Park, will be renamed Disney Adventure World. This is an indication that the park will probably slowly bail on the, quote, studios theme, started with Disney MGM Studios, now Disney's Hollywood Studios. The park is also getting a log flume ride themed to The Lion King. While the concept art appeared to show the characters from the live-action remake in 2019, the company assures fans that it will be based on the 1994 animated film. It definitely looks like this will be a next step from the ride system that started with Splash Mountain and has been advanced for Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Disney Adventure World is also set to open a new land based on Frozen in 2026. If it's anywhere near as impressive as the Arendelle that has already opened at Hong Kong Disneyland, I think this will go a long way in helping to fix a barely half-day park. It should also make Disneyland Paris a whole lot more of a desirable destination for American guests. Disney Adventure World is also scheduled to get a nighttime spectacular water show that utilizes the technology from World of Color in Disney's California Adventure. Spider-Man is going to be more visible at the parks in China. First, it will be a big thrill ride for Shanghai Disneyland with a Spider-Man coaster. In Hong Kong Disneyland, Peter Parker will be teaming up with Tony Stark for an attraction. It will be the third attraction at Stark Expo in Tomorrowland. I also wanted to take the time to mention the Disney legends who were honored at D23 because there were some big names who garnered a lot of attention, but some pretty impressive people you may not have heard of before who really earned these accolades. Frank Oz brought to life Muppets and, of course, Star Wars characters like Yoda. Harrison Ford and John Williams were also honored for their work in Star Wars and other projects that fall under the Disney umbrella. Colleen Atwood, Angela Bassett, James Cameron, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Kelly Ripa were all deserving honorees. Two artists were also named Disney legends. Mark Henn was instrumental in the creation of the animated styles for classic Disney characters, and cartoonist Steve Ditko did the same for many Marvel characters. The inclusion of Miley Cyrus was a little controversial, but I think she 100% earned it. I don't think a lot of people my age understand exactly how influential Hannah Montana was for Disney. Whether or not you're a fan of her music, she is incredibly talented, and I am so happy for her, and her speech was great. As somebody who has always been enamored by sitcoms, James L. Brooks was such an underrated choice. He's a co-creator for The Mary Tyler Moore Show, which is one of the best sitcoms ever, but it's also important to have a show based on a single working woman in the 1970s. He was there for the creation of Taxi. Anyone who has never seen Taxi, you need to find it on streaming. I believe it's still on Hulu, utilizing the talents of Tony Danza, Danny DeVito, Christopher Lloyd, and even the great Andy Kaufman. Couldn't have been easy, and they made it work. Probably most importantly, however, he is influential in the creation of The Simpsons. After MASH, I don't think there's any television show that completely changed the game as much as The Simpsons. Brooks and the other co-creators took the problematic tropes of sitcoms like The Cosby Show and turned them on their heads. Personally, I have talked on the channel before about how the portrayal of Homer Simpson in particular was a lifeline for me as a child growing up in an abusive household. When school and the local community blindly treated my abusive father as if he was infallible, The Simpsons showed me the hypocrisy of acting like every father was a well-meaning genius. Homer was an overweight, oafish, and intellectually devoid father who was prone to overreacting. When President George H.W. Bush said he wanted American families to, quote, look a lot more like the Waltons and a lot less like the Simpsons, what he failed to realize was that most American families weren't the Waltons, and showing that parents aren't these godlike beings incapable of error was important. Imagineer Joe Rohde, always a favorite of the Disney nerds, was also made a Disney legend. Rohde's biggest accomplishment has to be Disney's Animal Kingdom. Rohde traveled the world and designed a theme park that is immersive in ways that have probably never been reached anywhere else. When adding Pandora, the world of Avatar, to the park, Rohde was given the task of putting an intellectual property that wasn't designed to be a part of the park and fitting it into the theme of conservation. Rohde worked with Avatar creator James Cameron to build one of the most beloved lands in any Disney park. With the announcement that a new Tropical America's land will be replacing Dinoland USA at DAK, Disney also pulled some really good PR work. They were very quick to share a picture of Joe Rohde taking his own picture of the Tropical America's model that was on display at D23. This was Disney's way of trying to signify that Rohde has given his seal of approval to those changes. Finally, Martha Blanding is a name that may not be familiar to a lot of park goers, but her impact on the company has been immense. When she started working at Disney in 1971, she was one of the first black women to play a big role in the company. She was a VIP tour guide and was the first black female buyer and first black female manager. Pulse was a business employee resource group that she co-founded for black cast members and employees. She also played a part in the creation of the official Disneyana convention, which was a forerunner of D23. I'm so glad for the star power brought by Miley Cyrus, Harrison Ford, and Jamie Lee Curtis, because that attention was reflected towards other deserving recipients like Blanding. So now that we have spent the last 3 weeks on the podcast talking about all the changes coming to the Disney parks that were announced at the D23 Expo in Anaheim, California earlier this month, we are going to turn our attention to the changes as they start happening. We're going to start getting news about where these attractions are going to be placed in the theme parks, what we're going to be losing to make room for the new things. We already know that the Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer Island at Magic Kingdom and Walt Disney World will be demolished to make room for that new Cars expansion in Frontierland. I know a lot of people are very, very upset about that announcement. There is a new Monsters, Inc. land coming to Disney's Hollywood Studios in Walt Disney World, and many people are afraid that that land is going to be replacing the Muppets Courtyard and Muppets Vision 3D. I personally don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think there's enough room over there for the attractions that they're promising us. Hopefully, any Monsters, Inc. additions will be replacing either Animation Courtyard and Star Wars Launch Bay, or I do think it's very possible that the new Monsters, Inc. roller coaster is just going to be an overlay of Aerosmith Rock and Roller Coaster, and down on Sunset Boulevard, they might make that change to Monsters, Inc. The point being that D23 did not just give us 3 weeks worth of content. Eventually, all of these things are going to be coming to fruition, and we're going to get to talk about all of them from the time that the construction walls go up in the parks until they're doing annual pass holder previews, until any of us can go and experience these things in the parks. It is so exciting. Like Walt Disney said, Disneyland, these theme parks, they are not museums. Sometimes we're going to get mad about what ends up getting replaced, but that's all part of the conversation that we have here on the podcast. This has been episode 187 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. I'm so glad that you stayed with me today when I was the only voice on the show. Coming up in the next few weeks, we will have my co-host Sarah Says returning to talk about the 35th anniversary of the animated version of The Little Mermaid. I'm going to have a series of podcast episodes exploring the life of former Disney chairman and CEO Michael Eisner. We will hear from a member of the Disney fan community who not only shares my love of the theme parks, but also shares my love for the sitcom MASH. We will talk more about Epcot's International Food and Wine Festival. With all of that, we are also quickly approaching the 200th episode milestone. Make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. You'll want to be a part of everything we have planned for the rest of the year. There will be some major treats. There is another brand new episode of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty next Thursday. Until then, have a great week.